9 o'clock on the dot. I would like us to start with our meeting. This is the meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Account of the Provincial Legislature of the Western Cape. Let me make use of the opportunity to welcome all the members present, as well as the two delegations from the Gambling Board, as well as the IDZ. As you have seen in the agenda, we will be having presentation from this delegation. But also before maybe I may proceed, Mr. Davids, are there any apologies that you have received?
Chairperson, it is only from Mbaklejo, Chairperson. He is unavailable to attend today.
No, thank you very much.
Chair, also apologies, Chair. I see that Ms. Claire Horton from Provincial Treasury has got her hand up, Chair.
Yes, I've noticed that. I was just going to take that. I see there's a hand, Ms. Claire. Ms. Horton.
Good morning, Chair. There's just two colleagues that I would like to be invited into the meeting from Provincial Treasury. If you could please indulge me to ask Dustin to do so. It's Mr. Anthony Phillips and Dr. Ndanda Nelia.
No problem.
Okay.
Please, thank you so much.
I've already seen the link, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now then, if then both delegations are here, once again, welcome, honorable members as well as the delegation. And in terms of the agenda that has been circulated, the delegation that is going to do the presentation is the IDZ. Can I get an indication that the IDZ is available? Saldana IDZ?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, if that is available, then what I'll do, let me hand over to the delegation, introduce the people that are in the delegation, and thereafter we go into the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Just put my video on quickly to introduce myself. Thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee today. My name is Kasia Fabukas. I'm the CEO of the Saldanha Bay IDZ. With me on my team today is Doug Southgate, who is our Chief Operations Officer, and then Danielle Manuel, who is our Executive for Stakeholder Management. So I'm going to put my video off and then share the presentation that I've submitted to the committee as well. So can the committee see? I'm getting a bit of feedback.
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Okay, thank you. But if people can please switch off their microphones, because I'm getting feedback. Thank you. So we've been asked to brief on our funding model and our feasibility study, which was undertaken in the previous financial year. So our presentation today is just to introductory, firstly, on who we are, the funding model related to the questions in the committee's report, and then an executive summary of the Innovation Campus feasibility study. I have shared the document with Dustin, and I will take it as read because it's quite a lengthy document, and hence only sharing, updating, briefing the committee on the executive summary if that's, and certainly we'll take questions on it. So to begin, introduce the IDZ and just reasserting our mandate that we have. So our vision is to be Africa's premier oil, gas and maritime industrial and services center. I mean, that's quite a mouthful, but I want the committee to hold in their mind the vision of a shipyard and an industrial center all in one, and supported by, world-class facilities, infrastructure, and competitive industry from engineering, fabrication, and logistics in the zone. So what do we do on a daily basis? We foster responsible investment in the zone. We attract investment in the zone. And why we say it's responsible is because we acknowledge we have a socio-economic mandate as part of the SEZ program. And so it's not singularly about investment to us. We also act then as an inclusive and sustainable economic catalyst because of our, the framing of the SEZ program nationally. We realize that the effects of the zone don't just happen in the area that we are designated on. There are spillover benefits and impacts that we can leverage if we act as that catalyst. And then, why do we do all of this? Is because we want to build successful and responsible models of inclusive, sustainable development and thriving societies and economies for generations now and to come in Saldanha Bay and beyond. So we first focus on Saldanha Bay, but we think, plan and act long-term and broader than Saldanha Bay in itself, because an SEZ is a long-term venture that you need to plan and support accordingly. So the unique value, our value proposition, if you will, is that as a Schedule 3D state-owned company, we have a unique position in that regard with the enabling legislation that we have. We 100% shareholding by the Western Cape government. We have raised over 21 billion in an investment pipeline, and also leveraged 2.5 billion from public sector investment to date to develop the zone, because it was greenfield and has required a lot of capital infrastructure investment in and around the zone to take off, to prepare the site. We are still the first and only SEZ in port limits. I'm sharing the map there of the port limits, so you can see that the land that part of the land that we're designated on, which is on this side here, is within the port limits. We have concluded lease agreements with TNPA. We have 56 hectares to date, and we are still negotiating for an additional 20 hectares. 70% of our footprint is in a customs control area, which is similar to what you will know of in global practice as a free port, because we're in SEZ has a particular customs regime, and that's what makes us special. It's in a port. The further unique value that we've developed over the years is we have working agreements with the local authority in place as the key service delivery agent in the area and authority in the area. We recognize the value that the municipality can bring in terms of service delivery, utilities, but more than that, about the long-term planning that we can do together to realize both of our shared interests. We have also developed various local development programs, enterprise and skills development since we started. And we have made presentations and on this to the committee before. And just beginning of the lockdown, we launched an SMME CoLab, which is a facility in just opposite our industrial zone, where SMMEs from the region can access free internet and office space, printing and scanning, so that to support them with the administration of their businesses. This was a need that we identified through engagement with the community and over the many years of working with them on these construction projects, is that SMMEs felt that they didn't have a space, a professional place to hold meetings with tentative clients and do their administration affairs. We had to close it when the lockdown started, but we quickly realized with the feedback that we received from the need identified in the business community that they need to access the free internet services to access the COVID-19 relief measures that the government introduced, which was all online. And so we reopened mid-level 5 lockdown, and we had on average 10 SMMEs come through. Obviously, we obtained approval from the municipality and the Department of Health on how to reopen the facility correctly and safely. But on average, from our records, we helped and assisted 10 companies each day to access relief measures. That's, I think we've really contributed then to the economic recovery and sustainability in that regard. We have a diverse tenant pipeline that we've established over the years, which builds our resilience to the value that we offer to the market. And you can see there, one of the things that we did when the lockdown happened was we quickly realized we need to get in contact with our tenants in our pipeline and understand how COVID has impacted them so that we can adapt our planning and resources accordingly. And so we conducted a top 20 tenant survey in June, asking them questions of how has the lockdown affected them, what is their commitment to the IDZ, which was fully continuing, and what is it that they see as accelerators to their investment and reopening. We have just recently completed the Access Complex building, and you'll see a picture there of the site visit by the Minister in June, and a project leasing facility, which is a unique facility that we offer to the market for rental, is fully operational, and we are in construction at the moment. We had to wait for level 3, which has caused delays, obviously, on when those tenants can take occupation and the construction timeline thereof. But you will see that at the site visit in September, that building is one of the facilities that we're building for our tenants. Speaking of our tenants, who are they and where do they come from and what do they do? So they operate in different markets. As I've said, there's quite a diverse pipeline. But what you would see in the zone is shipbuilders, boat builders, manufacturers of different equipment, manufacturers of technology, which is an interesting area. You would see chemical production businesses, logistics businesses, business support services, like ship agencies, IT, legal, banking, visa. There would also need to be customs and a whole suite of government services in the IDZ as well. So you can see that there. And then the stakeholders that we deal with and work with in executing our mandate. So our key program partners would be the municipality, the Western Cape government, and DDAT as the oversight department, then TNPA, the DTI, and local business and local community. We work with a multitude of government departments and agencies, as you can see, as well as from the private sector in the industry associations and agencies, institutional investors. We have relationships there, and as well as formalized labor. So to go to the funding model and the question that was asked there. So our sources of income, there are 4 sources of income, essentially. Grant funding, which is historically from DDAT and the DTI. Project-specific funding from the CETAs for all of our enterprise and development programs and skills programs. Rental revenue from the land, buildings, and other services that we provide to our tenants. And then other revenue would be any administration, management fees, and interest that accumulates from the funding that we receive. The nature of the income thus far from DDAT, it's operational income earmarked for operational expenditure. We have the PG MTech process last year. We submitted these requests and it was tabled in the provincial legislature at the beginning of the year, with the agreement that at the end of the funding term, which is 2023, that we become self-sufficient with our revenue sources. From the DTI, that has been capital income earmarked for capital spending. And one of the things that came up in the comments last year was the underspending, and it is largely because we only commit to it when the funding is in our bank account. Contractually, it is what we from legislation what we are needing to do, and so the budget that we submit in this area is based on the contracts awarded and planned for the year. The total amount to date has been 1.1 billion since inception. From the CETAs, this is, as I said, project-specific funding, which is earmarked and outcome-orientated, with outcomes contractually agreed upon. So it's specifically for it's for a specific purpose. Revenue, so we generate that through our operations of the zone. We have had to adjust our revenue projection for 2021 due to COVID. We have taken a very conservative view because there are lots of unknowns and evolving unknowns as you know, the whole world adjusts to and tries to understand what COVID has wrought on our economy, our global economy, and our national economies and societies. And then particularly highlighting then our revenue model. So we've done benchmarking on the rental pricing model, then rental prices, which we enter into a lease calculator. That would give us then rental revenue, from land, buildings, the hectares that we have, the sectors that we're in, and the precincts. So we can assess that on those criteria. There are a set of assumptions that we make in terms of, the market. This goes into a forecast model, and apologies for that, the income statement, so that we can pull income statements, balance sheet, and cash flows, and then an estate-specific income statement from that. We have a dashboard where we can see the forecasting then in a surplus or deficit way, the break-even points, the projected project values, the cash flow, the land take-up, and the precinct rental. We have various scenarios that we can graphically illustrate also, and with data tables, and we also do sensitivity analysis on the numbers to show if they do make sense, and just retesting them again on the market as well. Moving on to the Innovation Campus. So why did we do it? It's because, we need to do it to drive the growth of the industries that we are mandated to support. And when we looked at researching other SEZs over the years and looking and comparing and assessing the dynamics in the industry and the industry of SEZs, because they are, I think, at my last recent report that I read, that said that there are something like 4,000 SEZs across the world. So they play a huge role in the innovation aspect, plays a huge role in strengthening local capabilities for innovation, and then also adding further investment into the zone itself. And also that an innovation campus is likely to yield positive impacts across a multitude of socioeconomic outputs. But we do need acknowledging that, you know, a comprehensive economic model will need to be developed as we go forward in this, to understand what the innovation campus is contributing to the local and regional economy. And yeah, as a business, as an entity, we need to continually innovate. Our competitors are innovating on their value propositions and their services to their clients, and it is something that is core to our principles as a 3D company. So the feasibility study covered 6 main areas: stakeholder insights, the value proposition, corporate strategy development, financial strategy, operational design, and implementation planning. Process itself, so we first did the stakeholder mapping. We did desktop research, we've built out a database, and then in consultation with the team and with, you know, because we've been working on this project for many years and working with many stakeholders, and we have a good understanding of the stakeholder mapping, and to ultimately determine stakeholder interest and influence and needs in the stakeholder mapping and stakeholder interviews. We also looked at international best practice of similar kinds of facilities, and also what was the local and international market trends and trajectories and the influence of current and future disruptive technologies on the various industries. So the market research as well on that. We developed a concept, building a business model, also looked at various governance concepts and the pros and cons of each of those governance concepts, because the type of governance arrangement could be very influential to who we attract into the innovation campus, because some companies have well-established R&D units or facilities or policies, and they might want to come in and use the innovation campus or a certain way, and the incorrect governance arrangement would limit their participation, may limit their participation. Also, the governance arrangement will also possibly make funding a problem or a challenge, I would say, and the fundraising aspect as well. We also developed a socio-economic impact model in the study process. We then incorporated all of these findings from the different areas, and with our feedback as well as clients, we had also to say we had a steering committee which had participants from the Department of Economic Development and Tourism in there. So it was very well represented in terms of holistic feedback. Then we went into the strategic modeling stage, where we developed the operational strategy in response to all of the findings. We developed a human resource strategy, the corporate strategy, the risk, and decision-making framework options. So with the decision-making framework, it's essentially to hold true to the purpose and the need of the innovation campus as we go through establishing the innovation campus, to go through the process of establishing the innovation campus, and to keep on asking why, and at each decision point, and to test it against what our core principles, our decided core principles need. Yeah. Then also a brand strategy. So, and then finally synthesizing all of the findings. So in terms of the research finding, this is quite a lot of text on here, I know, and it's quite a busy slide. But from the market insights, there's pros and cons. There is our location in South Africa is strategically located. Trade volumes are expected to grow and also there's more EAP activity on the continent. Obviously, these are findings before COVID, and in the process now of establishing the innovation campus, we are monitoring the market and seeing the activity grow and decline in certain areas similarly. There should not be any expectations about production. So what that means is, normally with an innovation campus, it is because you want to produce some new technology. You want to support the industry or support industry players and to produce a new technology or a new solution. Because of where South Africa is on this maturity of the industry and the concept, we should not have any expectations of production in the short to medium term. There's uncertainty about the volume of reserves in South Africa. International companies manage many portfolios and are likely to direct investments to portfolios that minimize risk and keep overall costs low. Offshore renewables has great potential. So we looked at it not just about oil and gas. It is about when we got the stakeholder insight as well as the market research. What we realized is that it's more about energy and the technology that is required and the innovation in the technology and the practice that is required to also support a just transition. Investment in Africa by international players is largely driven by local pricing. So, I mean, they'll go where the prices are lower. As I said, the exploration and production expenditure at the time was expected to grow. This has been impacted by COVID, and we are assessing that in our development of the innovation campus. There has been reduced investment in R&D due to cost control measures after the previous oil price slump in 2016. So they will only, the feeling was that from the market insights that they would only increase investment in R&D because of needing to increase operational efficiency and maintain profitable operations in future. Now, this is interesting because what COVID has done is obviously it's increased the need for operational efficiency. So our view is actually that the role of a technology innovation center is actually more paramount now because companies would need to invest in research and development and innovation. And the fact that South Africa, also another market insight, was that we had virtually a non-existent merchant fleet, which causes a loss of skills, innovation capacity, and potential revenue to foreign fleets. And fabrication is a challenge across the African continent. Other challenges that were identified was uncertainty around the regulatory framework. And that, as I said, the low carbon future, the just transition are changing the way industry invests, and trying to then therefore keep their costs low in preparation for a future. And then the skills shortage. On the tech insights, what we found is that there has been some application of technologies in the industry. I'm not going to go through them there, but there are also a range of non-technical factors that are critical. So the demographic dividend across, Africa, which is always said that is a lost opportunity that Africa is not capitalizing on. The increasing urbanization and changes in mobility, environmental change factors, shifts in global geopolitics, and changing consumer preferences, and increasingly tight emissions regulations as well. Further then on best practice insights. So when we looked at global best practice, what we found is that government backing is critical.
Sorry, Madam Vic.
Yes?
Sorry. I just want to check because I can see we almost half an hour into the presentation. How long do you still gonna be? Because we still also want to have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with the
No, it will be another 5 minutes, Chair.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. So the best practice insights and the further success factors. And then the stakeholder insights are quite diverse and listed there. So what the research showed was a convergence between those 4 research insights that as stated here. And what then flows is that the insights provide a clear market-led purpose for the Innovation Center. And what I want to say is that we've identified clear missions that the Innovation Center needs to drive, the user needs, the objectives of the center in the short term, and the impact that we want to create. And this is my last slide. What is fundamental in our approach then is that we start small, we build trust and experience, demonstrate wins, and be patient. Because there isn't a significant interest at the time for an innovation center in the IDZ, but considering the feedback that we got from stakeholders, reflecting that on the best practice insights, the market research, and the technology, appreciating then that this is a emerging industry and an emerging idea. Hence, starting small is the most best possible way to manage any risk of misalignment on expectation and outcomes. And smaller strategic R&D and innovation partnerships can help to solve then specific goals that would act as a mechanism to build that needed trust in the innovation capabilities of the IDZ, of the zone itself. Well-established local demand for services will act as a catalyst, and the ease of doing innovation-related business is then therefore critical for the long-term success of the innovation campus and the industry, I might add. And the development of a cluster will take time, and it's best achieved by building small wins and validating that, and then adjusting as required. So thank you. Okay, I'm done.
No, thank you very much, Mrs. Beekers. Now, the honorable members, can I get an indication? Are there any questions or point of clarity trying to check now on my Honorable Maseko.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning.
Sorry, Jen, it will be, I see Honorable Nkondlo as well, his hand is up. I just want to check. And then after that, Honorable Bartman, in that order. You can go ahead, Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much, and good morning again. And again, thanks for the presentation. I think it's more informative than we expected, but we do appreciate that. I just want to find out, because I think that the resolution from our side was to find the specifics about the grants and subsidies which were received during the financial year and the grants included. Now, you indicated that. I wish maybe, I don't know if you can give that information now, or you can send it to us to find out that with the COVID-19, what are changes that you have to implement as you do the add-ons on your feasibility studies? Because it cannot, my take is that it might be, there are some changes that you have to do in your business plan to accommodate the new norm that we have now. And again, under the nature of income on that slide, you also put, you had I think the grants also. Can you explain? Because I thought that maybe the grant is something that maybe you cannot confirm that all the time you'll get there. Now, if you put it under the income, is it not exposing Saldanha IDZ to a failure in a way that you might plan expecting a grant and get lesser than you anticipated, especially coming to the COVID-19, that I think the Treasury has been moving the money around, trying to accommodate the changes that are happening. Why is it important for Saldanha IDZ to put the grants also under the income? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Honorable Nkondlo.
Sorry, Chair, just the last one. If okay. Also we can get the other revenue generated through operations on the revenue, what does it mean? What are other revenue generated? Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. Honorable Nkondlo.
No, thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation from the IDZ. The first one, I've got a couple of questions, Chair. The first one, I think on the first slide, which gives, you know, the broad strategic issues about the Saldanha IDZ, I think the presentation speaks about responsible investment and contributing towards inclusive growth. Now, I just want to check from the CEO, what does this mean in simple terms, and whether the IDZ can provide us, you know, some indicators that they are using, you know, to determine if they are realizing or what they would in their own investment engagement or negotiations with both domestic or international investors to say, you know, this actually qualifies as responsible investment. So I'm interested to know if there is such that determines, you know, beyond it being a statement there, how do they measure such, and what compose responsible investment and inclusive growth in the context of the Saldanha IDZ? I'll be interested if they do have those indicators to send to us, you know, for one to look at what does it include. And I think in one other slide, it indicates a 2.5 billion that has been, I'm assuming it has been actually utilized now against the predetermined investment, if I'm using the right lingo. And I just wanted to check that in terms of if you then use that 2.5 billion investment, in whatever indicators that she would give us in terms of responsible investment, what would be those things that she would say that 2.5 billion, sort of bought in terms of that responsible investment and inclusive growth. So for me, this is how it will be interesting for me to understand how do you quantify, the things that are in your strategic vision in terms of realization, from a results point of view. And then the other one, I think in the other slide, they mentioned the ITZ is currently, in terms of its governance, 100% owned by the provincial government. I just wanted to check, and also when I looked at the slide they had of the different stakeholders, there is no indication about, the role of DTIC, other than when it was mentioned in the later slide on the sources of revenue. So I'm trying to understand at what point is there interface in the governance, firstly in the governance of IDC, of the SEZ, given that DTI also is a financial contributor, is one of the major financial contributors to the ITZ. What exactly is the governance engagement do they have with the national DTI, who is also a policy custodian of SEZs in the country, including the SEZ Act? The next one, Chair, is about the overall spending on the OPEX of the entity. If the CEO can give just the ball figures, and maybe they can send it later, in terms of the current almost 37 million to be reduced to almost 34 as they exit, to be self-sustainable. What are the biggest core cost centers of this? Because if I look at it as an operational budget, in an entity from the what I've seen, small, although complex in terms of what it does, what are the huge cost centers that actually compose, the current almost 37 million budget towards their operational expenditure? And yes, then the other slide on the sources of revenue, they speak about SITAs, but they've not quantified to date how much have they received from SITAs, and which SITAs are those, and what, if any, money that they've received from SITAs, if there's any programs that have funded those particular SITA initiatives. So if she can just provide that cost. And then, Chair, I want to check the local development and SMME collab, who funds it? And I'm raising this because I remember part of the conversation that led us to where we are is actually one conversation we have been having with the IDZ, also in the Finance Standing Committee, about the challenge in the current model, of funding the development function, which I think is led by Mr. Patrick Lakaban. So I'm trying to understand, currently there is a local development and SMME collab, which I'm assuming, and that I will be corrected, that it's part of that particular program under Mr. Lakaban. So what is currently, how much is allocated to this, and who is funding, this particular program? I will stop there for now, Chair, with my questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Honorable Bartman.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Dustin, the procedural officer, who also assisted me because I was driving to the office and he sent me the link. So I want to send out a special shout out and thank you for assisting me for getting onto the meeting. Chairperson, I heard that the CEO spoke about the offshore renewable energy possibilities, but not a lot of detail was mentioned in that, as well as apparently there was a study regarding that possibility of offshore renewables. And I wanted to find out if the CEO could give us some more detail regarding that, and if that information and research has not been provided yet, if that could be forwarded to us, please. And then secondly, I think last night it was on slide 17 that I was reading about the political volatility affecting the industry and limited local oil and gas beneficiation in the area. And I wasn't able to keep up with the slides during the meeting, but having read them last night, I just want to understand, because on that slide it spoke to things that stakeholders felt were barriers in terms of the Saldanha IDZ. And I just want to understand exactly what does that mean. And then finally, Chairperson, recently there's obviously been reports of a dispute between Avidia Energy and Sunrise Energy with regards to the offloading of liquid petroleum gas, not the natural gas, the liquid petroleum gas. And Transnet obviously said that they hope to have finished the hearing within that week. And it's about a week and a half-ish later now. And I just want to know whether Saldanha IDZ knows anything about that hearing. Has it been concluded? Has Transnet engaged Saldanha IDZ? Are the companies with them? Do they know? Have the companies engaged them in any sort? Because I know that I moved a motion in the House also to ask that Transnet assures the people of Saldanha Bay that the hearing will be concluded in a fair and a speedy manner, and also to ensure the people of Saldanha that all security measures are being taken when it comes to the offloading of liquid petroleum gas. And I would just like to know that if Saldanha IDZ is a stakeholder in that dispute, that such clarity and assurance can be given to us. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Mrs. Piekus.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask some of my team to help answer the questions, and I'll call upon them as required. So on the first question from Honourable Maseko on the specifics about the grants and subsidies, and I think the two, if you forgive me, the two last key points that the member raised was why the grants are under income, and what is detailed in what does other revenue generated consist of. So to answer the first question on why are grants under income, as a well, firstly, we recognize that it is a grant, but in holistically taking it as income into the operations, we all view it in that regard and under income, under the broad banner of income. Secondly, as an SEZ that is in the establishment stage, we require that grant funding to fund the operations of the entity whilst we are investing the capital required and also establishing the investment pipeline and bringing the IDZ, SEZ on board. So we certainly understand that it is grant, but in terms of the, as you will also see on my slide and the nature of the income, we recognize that there is an end date to that grant, and that is factored into our business plan, our strategic plan, our new 5-year strategic plan that was tabled just at the beginning of this year, and our annual corporate plan. So our view is to reach self-sufficiency by 2023 still. What COVID has done is has as I said, we've had to adjust our revenue projections because as the grant goes down, revenue from other sources then needs to come up, and in particularly rental revenue, and that. So therefore, it's this. If I can use the analogy of, it's the downward trend of the operational grant income that is in our model, and then the upward trend of the revenue that is what we are 100% focused on and is a priority for us, and that we have to manage despite all the volatility in the market. And we have also reconfigured our operational expenditure budget in response to COVID, such that we can retain our status as a going concern, and because as we invest all of this capital into the IDZ and build these assets, they need to be equally maintained, and as we get tenants into the zone, they need to be serviced. We are responsible for the estate management, so the maintenance of the entire property, all of the services, making sure that our tenants get what they are paying for. And that is our legal obligation as the estate manager. So that is why grants are under income, and also why you will see that it does reduce over the next 3 years to 0 then. And revenue, and what we're doing as an organization is refiguring our operational expenditure in light of COVID and the volatility on revenue, and also putting practices in place that will ensure and still secure investment into the zone. Yeah, then other revenue generated, what does that mean? It's administration and management fees that we levy on. So for example, from the CETAs, we get secure that project specific funding for programs for a particular initiative. But as the facilitator and the catalyst and the central point of that administration of that project, then managing the students, managing the service provider, also being accountable for the reporting back to the CETA, we levy a administration fee, which is part of the service level agreement that then we would have, and the funding agreements that we would have with the CETAs, for example. So in the accounting of it, that's why it's labeled as other revenue. With regards to member Nkotlow's question on responsible investment, and I will include the 2.5 billion also question, because I think those guys, the core question is how do we measure that we are fostering responsible investment and measure the impact of the 2.5 billion that has been invested and leveraged. And I'll ask Doug to answer that question, please. Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very tough question when you get to inclusivity, but I'll get to that. So essentially, we've run, since we started, we've run an economic model that both tracks what we've done and also tracks into the future. And that model measures GGP, which is gross geographic product. It measures GDP, and it also measures local, provincial, and national jobs created. So from that point of view, we have a pretty good idea of what's happening and what has happened. And then on top of that, that the 2.5 billion that we've had has been tracked and has given us those results. So from the point of view of how we, and sorry, the last thing is it doesn't just create, it also tracks a contribution to the fiscus. So in effect, we have the history of that. Over and above that, most of that money has been spent in contracting, and one of the things was to make sure that local contractors, and when I say local, I mean local within the Saldanha Bay precinct rather than local in the definition of South African local, to make sure that this money was used as much as possible to grow those businesses. And so we also track that on a project by project basis or a contract by contract basis, and that's moved up from, I think initially around about 25% to up around 65, and we have those numbers and we're able to share them with you. When it gets to inclusivity, it's been, and it's a conversation that Kashfa and I have had often and for a very long time. The only way you can see whether you're inclusive is by tracking the Gini coefficient, and well, I'm not sure it's the only way, but it's the only way that we know how. And unfortunately, that can't be done at a local level. And the Saldanha Bay intervention at a national level is not going to show any movement on the Gini coefficient because it's not a big enough. Well, it would show some, I suppose, but very little. So it's very difficult, other than by tracking what's actually happening in the community. And I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if anybody if that answers that question.
Yeah. No, thank you, Doug. To the third question from member Nklotlo on the role of the DTI and the governance arrangements, we have a board representative from the DTI on the board. So the DTI has a seat on our board for the entity, as well as a program in the national SEZ program. We have direct oversight and support from the National SEZ Unit Office, and we meet monthly with them on tracking our progress, updates on the investment pipeline, and any challenges that our tenants, our investors, and ourselves may be facing that we'd like them to help solve. And similarly, we do quarterly reporting to them as well, to feed into the national reporting on the SEZ program. Then on the question of the OPEX, so the biggest cost centers, I can offhand tell you what the biggest cost centers are, but if the committee would like more detail on that, we can certainly share that breakdown for you. But the biggest cost centers would be our leases with TNPA. They don't come at zero cost. We pay TNPA for the land that we rent from them. And on the seaters, the quantified to date and from whom, we can certainly give that information to the committee for further illustration of that breakdown. My apologies for not having it in the presentation. I did not know that that was an expectation from today. And then on the SME CoLab, so who funds it? So to understand that and to answer that question fairly, the CoLab was the old site camp that one of our contractors built in order when they put the services in the northern precinct. So rather than tear them down, as most site camps are done, and also we also decided that it needed to be a more permanent site camp, because we didn't want contractors to have higgledy-piggledy site camps all over the site, because I mean, it just becomes quite cumbersome and very administrative to manage, and quite costly, because every site camp needs their own admin, security, IT, water connection and electricity connection and all of that. So rather build a bigger site camp and a more, would want to say more durable one. And when the contracting was over and we were not yet ready to proceed with the next round of civil services contracts that we required. What we decided is, rather than tear it down, convert it into a space for the SMMEs. So the capital cost of the site camp of the CoLab came through from the capex from the DTI then. And so in terms of the operational costs of the CoLab that we fund through our operational income, and it is really a valuable asset to the small business community, because they don't have it was reasserted through COVID over the past few months. There is no other currently place like that for SMMEs on the West Coast. And they use it daily for meetings and to do their work, have a place where they can, have a desk, bring their computer and do their admin, do their quotes, and it really is a valuable asset to that business community. And then on the Honourable Bartman's questions on the offshore renewables energy possibilities, so that, but also just maybe if I can say that the feasibility study is not the feasibility study of the IDZ, just to be clear on that. It is the feasibility study of a new project that we are initiating, which is the Innovation Campus. It's called the SPIDZ Innovation Campus because it will be on our land, and we're initiating the venture. But this is not about the questioning and establishing the feasibility or the bankability of the zone. This is about establishing the feasibility and the needed operational, the corporate strategy, and what this thing needs to look like and behave like and do in order to be successful in its own right. So firstly, I just wanted to clear that with the committee. On the question of the offshore renewables, I will admit that I am not an expert in this field. There are much more people who are knowledgeable on this than me. I hesitate to answer, and I will ask indulgence to possibly give a written reply once I've consulted with the team that actually did this research and go delve deeper into the findings from the research. So I beg your indulgence on that. On the question of political volatility from the stakeholder insights, it wasn't political volatility at the local level or at the regional level. It was, nationally as a country, I would want to say, political volatility that is likely to affect the industry. And I think because what political volatility does is it leads to policy uncertainty, which I'm sure this committee is well aware of the refrain from the industry, from business on that. So it needs to be taken in that regard. And that was one of the insights from the stakeholders, from stakeholders given in the study. On the question of Vidia and Sunrise, Honourable Member, I am not au fait with the recent progress on that matter. It's not within our space. Literally, it's outside the footprint of the zone, and their developments and projects are independent of ours. So we do not have any direct commercial interests or relationships with Sunrise and Avidia in their their disagreement or that they're having. Yeah, I think that I think I've answered all of the questions, Chair. If there's any further follow-ups, then I'm happy also to do so.
No, thank you very much, Ms. Speaker. I just want to check then, honorable members, are there any follow-up questions? Going once, twice, gone. I see Honorable Nkondlo.
Chair, it's a small one. I would appreciate. I think on the question on the investment matrix or whatever tool that the IDZ is using. I think for me, my interest is to really be able to provide us that tool if they do have, as it was responded to, so that one can actually look at that. And secondly, I think on the inclusive growth, I think it's a conversation perhaps that is not necessarily a scoper question. It can actually be a question in the economic development, because I know through Provincial Treasury, a municipal economic review that looks at the outlook, the economic outlook of that local area is something that I'm interested to understand how the economic activities of IDZ, gives an indication, or any impact to that, because already there, I mean, the Gini coefficient of the local area is something that is actually reported in there. So I'm just saying, maybe if we can get that, and maybe we can follow up on that specific question of how we collectively measure the impact of the IDZ, both in terms of the responsible investment, including the issue of inclusive growth. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Honorable Nkondlo.
Chair, if I may respond, we will certainly share the we can certainly share that matrix of the our economic model, and we note the response on the inclusivity question. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Ms. Speakers. If there are no further questions, I think it brings us to the end of the presentation of the Saldanha IDZ delegation. Let me make use of the opportunity to thank you very much for your availability and the presentation that you have made in front of us. Thank you very much. You may now be excused so that we can go to the next presentation.
Thank you, Chair and honourable members.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, this now takes us to the next presentation of the Gambling Board, and I know I've seen Mr. Lakay was in the house, and then I'm going to hand over to you, sir, and then you can introduce your delegation and start with the presentation.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and members. We sincerely thank you for this opportunity to brief the Public Accounts Committee on the following items: the 2018-2019 key risks, the long-term sustainability of stakeholder trust plan, and thirdly, the terms and conditions which relate to application of licenses of the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board. Our delegation today, accompanying me from the board, is Mr. Rowan Nichols, and then our executive committee, Mr. Primo Abrams, the Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Zoe Siwa, the Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Yvonne Skepu, the Manager Legal Services, Mr. Robin Bennett, HOD Compliance, Ms. Megan Basson, HOD Licensing, Mr. Alvin Matthews, HOD ICT. He will also share our presentation to the members. And then last but not least, Ms. Sweetness Sikupane, HOD of Human Capital. Chair, our CEO will lead the introduction, and then further he will indicate as to who will lead the presentation on these 3 items that have been requested. On conclusion of the presentation, we will take questions from the members or any additional information that may be requested that not specifically is included in the presentations. Thank you so much, Chair. I will then mute my microphone as well as just take off the video, and I'll hand over to our CEO, Mr. Abrams, now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Chair and members. Thank you for the thank you for us being able to present this presentation. And what will happen is the first 2 items, the key risks and the long-term sustainability, will be presented by Ms. Siva, our CFO, and the terms and conditional licenses will be presented by Ms. Son, HOD licensing. So without further ado, Ms. Siva will take it. Thank you, sir.
Thanks very much.
Good morning, members. Thank you for this opportunity to present to the PIC on these matters as requested. If we then start with the key risks that were considered during the 2018 and 19 financial year, the first 3 risks, as per the slides, deals primarily with the risk due to the lack of quorum of the board. For the 2018-19 financial year, for the majority of the year, only 5 members were appointed to the board. A full complement of board members are 7 members, which means all 5 of those 7 members were required to attend board meetings. And if they could, it was not possible then to have board meetings. Then, in terms of the escalating cost to accommodate changes in traveling, now colleague, just go back 1 slide. That was particular in terms of the board member that resided in Gauteng. So due to the fact that the board only had 5 members, the board committees had to be restructured, and Mr. Farku had to take additional functions because each committee had to make provision for alternate members. So the mitigations in terms of those were meetings were set at the beginning of the year to ensure members are timely aware of dates. For example, the board does have a board calendar which sets out all the dates, and these dates are being approved at the beginning of each year so that the members know exactly when the board meetings are, as well as the committee meetings. We had to reschedule some of the meetings where possible, and then urgent matters were resolved via round robin. In terms of the cost, the escalating costs to accommodate the member in Gauteng, we had to allocate budgeted funds from other departments within travel and subsistence to accommodate for this risk. The next slide, please. The next risk deals with the risk of litigation in respect of the expiration of the limited payout machine operators fees. So at the end of March 2018, the board had the contingent liability to the amount of 17.6 million. And at the end of March 2019, so last year, the board had the liability to pay 6.5 million to our 2 route operators because some of the fees are prescribed in that year in terms of the Prescription Act. And the board also received a settlement discount to the amount of 1 million from one of these operators. And we paid the remaining amount in April 2019. So what we then did, I will speak to the proposed amendments to the legislation in terms of the loss of that fee. Then in terms of risk 5, the increased litigation consuming board resources. The gambling industry proves to be very litigious. The board's decision and actions are often challenged based on the vested economic interests of license holders and other role players. So what the board usually does is to try to negotiate or have discussions with licensees. before we reach to the point where the matter has to be settled in court. Then the next one deals with the sustained funding of the board's activities with the loss of the major revenue streams. So the members would know that the board does get a substantial amount of the board's funding currently is in the terms of a government grant. And the reason for that is that the board no longer receives the LPM operator fee and the casino exclusivity fee. But so those are currently gaps in the Act that still exist. But as the members would know, Provincial Treasury is in the process to address those through amendments to the Act. Next slide, please. In terms of notes, risk 7, the loss of the stakeholder trust and the board's ability to perform its mandate. This was in terms of a delay in implementation of a board resolution, which could not be implemented until such time the board concluded engagements with Provincial Treasury and the Minister of Finance on this matter. In terms of the mitigation, the chairperson of the board engaged with the minister on this matter on a regular basis. We kept the stakeholders abreast of the situation to mitigate any loss of trust in the board. And this is also was also a standing agenda item at the meetings held between the board and the Provincial Treasury. In terms of the accommodation constraints and delay in finalizing accommodation, the members would note that the board has subsequently moved to 100 Fairway in Parow. So the board there's no longer key risk in terms of the accommodation constraint. Next slide, please. 9, lack of cooperation from enforcement agencies as a result of illegal gambling not being considered as a priority crime. This results in a backlog of cases and increased storage cost. The mitigation for this risk is concerted efforts to achieve cooperation from law enforcement agencies by engaging with decision makers of the various applicable units. I have to say that I think that the compliance department has built meaningful relationship with the South African Police Service, by which they assist the board in the event that we do need to either close down illegal gambling operation or where we have to confiscate illegal gambling machines. There's also various law enforcement fora to highlight where the board take part in those, to highlight the importance of gambling regulations and illegal gambling eradication. Unable to enforce compliance, the board being unable to enforce compliance on license holders in respect of excluded persons due to the lack of clear legislation, which results in problem gamblers still accessing the casinos. The mitigation in terms of that, engage with license holders to ensure processes are in place to prevent excluded problem gamblers from entering the gambling floors and undergo registered treatment before being allowed back onto the gambling floor. And we also have quarterly meetings. So the board does has a responsible gambling forum where we do invite various operators from the industry as well as the South African Responsible Gambling Forum, where these issues are then discussed. Yes, thank you. In the next slide. The next key risk is the program not being able to perform core functions adequately due to the lack of resources and human capital not trained in developing gambling environment changes, which could result in non-achievement of strategic objectives. So in terms of the training that is available in South Africa, there's not a lot of gambling related training available in South Africa. And with the rapid change of the gambling industry in terms of technology, there's also the risk that the board would be behind. And so the mitigation in terms of that is relevant training prioritized directly with the developers of new gambling machines. As an example, I know that the HOD of compliance would send his team for lab training with the specific labs, and that is how we then mitigate, as an example, one of the risks. and then also the continuous monitoring of new innovations in the gambling industry and employee strains on the new developments. And I think therefore it is important for the board then to attend conferences where these new developments and issues are being discussed, to ensure that the board is actually up to date with all the new developments. Processes delayed or not performed due to a load shedding or unavailability. I think all the members would know that currently we are still struggling with load shedding. Luckily, in our new building, we do have UPS, which is uninterrupted power supply. So if we're at work, the impact is not as it was previously. In the next slide, colleague. I think that deals then with the key risk. The members also asked that the entity implements a long-term sustainability plan to include various communities or stakeholders in the trust plans of the entity, and it briefs the committee on such a sustainability plan. So I think the members, this was due to the fact that in the board's financial statements, we do disclose trust assets as well as trust liabilities. So I will just explain as to what those disclosures actually means. So the board actually has two types of trust accounts: trust account operational. All license holders of the board must deposit funds with the board as prescribed to defray costs incurred by the board in assessing the applications. So in the act prescribed the deposit that each licensee, so applicant, must deposit into the trust account, and then the deposit is then used by the licensing departments to conduct probity tests to ensure that applicants are actually fit and proper to conduct gambling operations in the Western Cape. The board then opens a trust account in the applicant's name, which the applicant earns the interest on the account. The funds are under the control of the board, and the applicant has no access to the account saved through the board. The applicant gets a monthly statement from the bank and a reconciliation from the board. As the board incurs then the cost to investigate the suitability of the applicant to hold the license, the board draws funds from the trust accounts to defray these costs. This ensures that there are no bad debts or unpaid accounts, and accordingly, the board's debt account is guaranteed. This, however, does not guarantee self-sufficiency, as the full operational expenditure is not yet fully recovered from these fees. At the end of the process, the applicant is refunded the unspent funds, or can elect to have it remain in trust for future costs incurred by the board on the now licensed operator. Then the second type of trust deposits are trust securities. The license holder places funds with the board either as prescribed or calculated to secure the taxes in the fund payout should the license holder be unable to honor these commitments. The board, the same then in terms of how the boards open the trust account, is the same with the operational trust account. Should there be any default by the license holder in paying taxes, which are due, the taxes can be recouped from the specific trust account, and the license holder is sent a letter of demand to replenish the shortfall in this trust account. And should the license holder fail to pay any proven bets due to punters, the bet can be paid from this trust account to the punter, and the license holder is sent a letter of demand to replenish the shortfall in this trust account. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Siwa. Honorable members, any indication of questions that you'd like to ask to the gambling board? I see, Chairperson, you want to add? Are there any addition that you want to make? I see Mr. Lekey's hand is up.
Yeah, the Chairperson, I was just wanting to question whether we continue with the briefing, the presentation, the next item, the terms and conditions, or yeah, if you
Okay,
work
no,
on
I think what we do, so then, honorable members, let's just allow the board to complete their presentation, and thereafter we will do the questions.
Thank you.
Please
Thank you,
continue,
Chairperson.
Chairperson.
Ms. Basson will now do the presentation on those conditions. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, good morning, members. Good morning, Chair and colleagues. I'll move over to slide number 12, if we may. I think slide 11 just sets a bit of a background. What is understood is that the query relates to the credit risk management that's relevant to the board's financial asset of accounts receivable, and more particularly in terms of the terms and conditions that's applicable to prospective gambling licensees. What we set out is that all applications for gambling licenses must be accompanied by supporting documentation that will allow us to verify the identity as well as the suitability of the relevant applicants. We just set out for the committee some of the documents that we would scrutinize, and this includes all identification documents, passports, visas, permits in respect of natural persons. And this is in terms of the personal history disclosures application form that we would utilize. Then we also receive all the CIPC registration documents relevant to juristic persons, and that would be involved in our business entity disclosure application forms. We go as far as to receiving spousal information, especially when people are married in community of property. And we also scrutinize the tax compliance records of the respective applicants. And that will involve tax clearance certificates as well as the assessments that go with those. We delve into the academic records, the qualifications and employment history of natural applicants, as well as their criminal records and credit risk assessments. Bank statements are also scrutinized, and these are then also compared with the assets and liabilities and the income and expenditures that are submitted. With regards to the corporate entities, we also scrutinize their financial statements, and we review projections that they've submitted to us. So in addition to all of the above, the applicants must also deposit a statutory amount, and I think Ms. Siwa also alluded to that earlier on. And these amounts differ based on the type of application that is being made. These amounts are then placed in the trust accounts, and as we produce the various steps or the activities, we will then those costs will be used to cover those steps. Should the deposit then be insufficient, we will always call for additional funds. The intention is that no investigative work is done before there is sufficient funds in the accounts. And this obviously serves to mitigate the board's financial asset, the credit risk to the board's financial asset. Once found suitable and the license is awarded, that license is then coupled with a set of license conditions that can be either generic or will be generic, or specific as a direct consequence to the findings of the assessment or the investigation that was conducted. And obviously, once licensed, then the respective license holder also falls under the auspices of the legislation, the respective rules of the industry type, etc., along with the license conditions. And that would conclude my section, Chair. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Basson. Chairperson, are there any further presentation?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. No, we have nothing further to add other than what has been presented to the committee members, and we will take any questions with regards to what has been presented, but also questions around these matters that may not have been included in the presentation, specifically around risk or license conditions. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Honourable Maseko, I saw your hands was up in terms of questions.
No, Chair, it was, I was
Okay.
going to indicate that we get all the presentation before the honourable members can shoot with their questions.
Okay. No, apparently they've the board is finished. The gambling board is finished with their presentation.
No, I mean, when I raised my hand, it was
okay.
Today.
Oh, okay. No, thanks. Are there any questions, honourable members? Honourable Partman.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to find out. Sorry, I'm just quickly gonna. Sorry, Chair, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Very clear.
Okay. Now, I just wanted to find out, given that we've now been dealing with COVID and a lot of us, for example, at the Provincial Parliament has been using Zoom, we've been using MS Teams, and I just want to know.
Honourable Partman. Honourable Partman. It looks like we've lost the Honourable Partman there.
Yeah, she will come back. Just hold on. She is here. You can use mine. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just quickly using Honorable Maseko's line because I'm at the office now. My line doesn't seem to be working at the moment. I wanted to know how are online platforms, like for example at Provincial Parliament we're using MS Teams, sometimes people use Zoom, how are those online platforms assisting the board in mitigating some of the risks that they've indicated in today's presentation? And will we be seeing a mitigation of funds that would have gone to those in the next report? Thank you.
Look like that's the only question really we have on that. Chairperson.
Honourable Chair, Honourable Bartman, thank you for the question with regards to online platforms. Indeed, the board is using both Zoom as an online platform and MS Teams, depending on whom we are connecting with. The board's preferred platform for virtual interaction is the Zoom platform. Through our ICT department, we have ensured that the necessary securities are in place, and having had all the concerns when COVID-19 first raised its head and there were no chance of having any face-to-face meetings. Since the advent of the lockdown regulations, and still to date, all board meetings are conducted on the Zoom platform, where it is also necessary that we have guests such as licensees attend meetings to brief the board on certain matters. They will join on the virtual platform of Zoom. Similarly, all of the board's subcommittees are utilizing the platform of Zoom, and there are no site visits taking place by any of the commitments. From the operational side, there may be limited site visits, which is absolutely necessary for the conduct of business operations that may take place. With regards to funds, obviously, members would have had to attend meetings and there would have been payments for members to travel to board meetings. So that is not being paid currently because members are online. However, the board does compensate members for the costs incurred with regards to data, but it is a fixed amount not exceeding 500 Rand per month for members to have data. And again, that is a maximum amount. Members would have to justify the costs of data incurred to enable the claim to be paid. Yeah, we also use MS Teams, particularly when we interact with the members from the Western Cape government, with Western Cape Provincial Treasury, or other parties that does not use the Zoom platform. So, yeah, very, very much virtual. Most of the operations are conducted. Our members are also members of staff, are also working from home. There are people working from the office, those who are unable to, but the majority of our members are working from home and then are connecting virtual. If the CEO has anything to add, that's it from my side, and I trust that we have answered the member's question. If any further information is required, member, please just follow up. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Honourable Maseko.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies. Maybe if I was cut off, I didn't hear. On the issue of the communities or stakeholders in the trust plans of the entity, I'm just interested to hear the communities that are involved, that the board is working with, that they did include here. Where are those communities? Maybe if they can give us example of where are those communities and how are they directly including them, sort of the modus operandi of inclusion of that communities. If we can hear how do they do that, I will really appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I will ask Ms. Siwa and then the CEO to respond to Honourable Maseko's question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maseko, for the question. I'm not sure I understand your question because the trust that we have is not for the benefit of any community. The trust fund of the board is when a licensed applicant makes the application to the board or an existing license holder, they deposit funds into those trust accounts in order for the board to use those funds in the execution of our duties. So the funds in trust is not necessarily for communities. What the license holders do, what we do in terms of our license conditions, they need to expend a certain percentage of the CEO can help me here, but based on the I think net profit or something, and they need to spend that in terms of the corporate social as a corporate social investment. So the trust funds doesn't have anything to do with the communities. Where the communities come in is I think how the license holders then use the corporate social investment to invest in the communities in which they operate. I hope I answered the member's question.
Yes, you did answer my question, but it was more of much as that is the principle. I wanted to understand, take it, I'm a layman, I don't have a clue of what I'm reading here. And then it says that the entity implements a long-term sustainability plan, include various communities or stakeholders in the trust plans of the entity, and that it briefs the committee on such a sustainability plan. Now, remember in your annual report on page 100, it was saying that the committee notes that the entity disclosed trust funds of the total of 20.719 million for the financial year under review. So we wanted to understand that now, to what an extent that when we say this it would make sense to me as a layman. So I hear the way you answered is like, I already know. Now I'm coming from SCOPA, not in the committee itself. And I want to have an understanding of what is it that is the committee have to know about this trust, whilst is there like a fund that is for operations of the board itself. You get what I mean?
Yes, ma'am, I think I understand. There's no trust fund for the board itself. So these trust funds are in the name of this different license holder. So you have various license holders. So this is not only one big account. These, for example, 30 or 40 trust accounts, maybe 50. And then each of those license holders would each have their different trust account. So let's, for example, we have, let's say you apply to the board, then you need, in terms of the act then says, member, you need to deposit 2,000 Rand into your trust account. Then the board will open a trust account in your name. You will deposit the 2,000 Rand in the trust account. And now, before the board can approve a license, it must satisfy itself that you are fit and proper. So, for example, we will investigate your financial background, whether you have any dealings, etc., etc. And let's say the total cost that the board incurs to do that investigation is 1,500 Rand. Then the board will transfer 1,500 Rand from the trust account to the board's primary bank account. So that trust account is in the name of someone else. It is not for the board. Only when the board performs work, it then charges the amount that the work incurred, and that amount is then transferred from the trust account into the board's primary bank account. The board doesn't have a trust account in its own name. It only has...
Sorry, Chairperson.
Yes, Honorable Maseko, you want to interject or you don't want to? You want to make a follow-up?
I want to interject because I think maybe she did not understand what I was asking. Maybe if she can go to slide 8, it will be easy.
Honorable Maseko, can you just allow her to finish? Because I've also got other follow-up questions I would like to ask in relation to this. So I will definitely come back to you.
Member, if I can just speak to slide 8. So the request from the PAC or SCOPA was that the entity implements a long-term sustainability plan to include various communities or stakeholders in the trust plans of the entity. Member, the board cannot, from our side, we cannot go out and ask people to, so I don't know how to explain this. I don't think the board is able to implement a long-term sustainability plan to include various communities in the trust plan, because the trust plans of the board is just to have funds available for work to be performed. CEO or the chairperson, I don't know how to explain this.
Yes. No, look, also it looked like then, because I think also when you were trying to explain in the beginning, maybe the CEO, when he comes in, you will also, so this trust has got nothing to do with corporate social responsibility, really. It's more a trust fund for the operational activities of the board. But maybe let's give the CEO or the chairperson, whoever will want to assist and chip in on this.
If I may come in, thank you, Honourable Chair. Just as you lastly pointed out, yes, these trust accounts, as they are incorporated in the annual financial statements, relates to trust accounts, and it includes the explanations that the CFO has just done. It is trust accounts which are established for the benefit of the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board to recoup expenditure that, to the extent the applicant for a license wants to incur costs. So it is not a trust in the ordinary sense that the entity will use for, let's say, communities as such. Without the establishing of this trust account, and why it is called a trust account, because the funds remain in the name of the applicant, not in the name of the board. If we had placed that funds in the funding of the board, it would not be able to be recognized as a trust which is being held on behalf of the applicant. And again, it is held on behalf of the applicant so that the processes that the board needs to follow in conclusion of the investigation for a license, that the board is ensured that the costs incurred during those processes will be able to be recouped, Chairperson. Yeah, it's perhaps not so easily understood, but if one can almost say at the outset, we want to be guaranteed that we will be able to recoup our costs incurred in a particular licensing process. The trust account is established and the applicant deposits the required funds into that trust account. And at the conclusion of the process, the funds sitting in that trust account is then transferred to the board to replenish the costs that have been incurred through that process, and then the license is issued. I'll ask our CEO to further add to my responses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is the CEO, is it Primo? I see there's a, who's Primo?
I'm the CEO, sir. Primo Abrams.
Oh, okay. No CEO.
Okay. May I go ahead, sir?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So these trust accounts that we show in our, or that we disclose in our financial statements, is very much the same as a trust account which a law firm has. So simply the client will deposit money with you, and that money is then utilized to defray costs, and whatever's left will go back to them. So it's simply an amount that they place with you in trust for various usage. The board itself cannot, it doesn't have a budget authority or even a legislative authority to form own trust, a normal trust in the normal sense of the word, for anybody's basic benefit. So we can't go open up a trust account and have sustainable plans for the communities per se, because that's not authorized in our mandate. And definitely the minister has not authorized any such budget that costs at all. So we don't have trust for the benefit of our communities. These trusts are simply, as I say, the legal thing. But what we do, and this is the chair's pet thing, is that our license holders via their CSI also has trusts, and they have to put money into these trusts for the benefit of those communities. And so all our major license holders, like the casinos, have trusts that has been created for the benefit of the communities, and that the board oversees. So we generally go out there and we ensure that those funds are used in the communities, and in fact the trust members are community members of these various communities. So that's basically a differentiation between us. We have our trust is the same as a legal entity, and we don't have a trust for the benefit of the communities. We're not authorized to do that. So I don't know if there's any further on that. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. I see there are quite a number of hands from members, but just from my side, CEO. So generally, the board as a board has got no corporate social responsibility trust of its own. It relies on the members that are actually applying for licenses to have those trusts for purposes of corporate social responsibility. But the board as a board doesn't have such a trust for purposes of corporate social responsibility.
You are correct, Honourable Chair.
Okay.
The board itself does not have those type of trusts and is not currently authorised by
Okay.
the budget process at all. Thank you.
Can I just give then the honorable members in the order that I'm going to mention? I see, let's start with Honorable Maseko, Honorable Bartman, and Honorable Gondro. Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Well, I'm sorry to interject, but what I wanted the gambling board to say to us was that, look, on your slide 9 and I think 10, it's everything that has to do with the debt trust account. This is not doable, like the Scopa said, that the long-term sustainability plan, there's no way we can be able to do that because this trust fund is like their law firm. That's the words that I wanted to hear from them, because sometimes we ask the questions to the department or the entities and we talk about things that is not doable to them. So the question that you just asked now of the issue of the social responsibility, where do they get out the funds for them to attend to that? It's what I was interested to know out of that, but I wanted that no, what the Scopa was saying has to happen is not doable because of what or the information that they gave to us. So thank you very much for the board to make it clear to us. But sometimes we need to be told honestly so that no, that is not doable, Scopa. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. I think Honorable Maseko covered much of what I actually wanted to say, and I think I just want to give the suggestion that if someone needs to say that, Deirdre, you need to go buy apples, that someone just say, Deirdre, you need to go buy apples. You don't need to say, Deirdre, the reason that we need to purchase this particular fruit with these qualities and colors and vitamins is for X, Y, and Z. No, just say, Deirdre, you need to go buy apples. Because the trust accounts is like lawyer accounts. You go to a lawyer, you pay them money, they put it into a trust account, and every time they do work, they take off money from the trust account. So on slide 8, where the Public Accounts Committee said that the entity must implement a long-term sustainability plan to include various communities, no, that is not correct. The topic is closed because you can't implement a long-term strategy for the trust accounts, because the trust accounts are for each client that goes to the board and puts money into that account, and then you deduct it because of activities or fees or whatever needs to be deducted, or if whatever. So I think perhaps we must just say, Deirdre, you need to go buy apples. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Honorable Ngonjo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me appreciate the explanation about the trust and indeed the differentiation, which is supposedly to just come clear on this particular matter of the relationship of those trusts with the stakeholder or community benefit or beneficiation from the work of the board. Now, for me, firstly, Chair, I think with the explanation of the CFO in what she was explaining that, you'll put this money, the board will do the licensing process and recoup its cost. If it's 2,000, it could be 1.5. And then I'm not sure what happens then to the difference of the 500. Now there, I've got just two issues to raise. One is whether there is a standard fee, for the different activities that the board will engage in with the licensees, based on the licensing requirements. So are there standard fees? And if so, once this money is being put to, because I'm trying to understand this particular logic of putting this money to the trust and then claiming it against the work that has been done. Is it because there is a difference in the activities based on a licensee's application or nature of their business? What will be that makes these activities different? So I just want to understand that. And if it is possible for the board to actually draw for us, over the past, let's say over the last year or two, some type of a spreadsheet that demonstrate, the number of licensees that they have had and what is in these accounts, because I can see, according to the explanation of the CFO, that there are two transactions that happen here. Is the licensee putting the money on the individual account, the money after being recouped by the board through its private account, so the money moves from the trust account to the private account, and then what happens? So I'm interested to understand this particular nature of transacting. So if it is possible for them to draw that and send it to us, so that we also can have a visual picture of the explanation that they're making in here. Then moving from that, Chair, my second point and my last point is once again on this issue of how the coordination of the social responsibility or social development that is attached to the license being given to these licensees. Because I think I remember this question having been asked, we asked it in one of these conversations with the board. And for me, it is always not clear. I hear now that the board says, yes, they oversee that. And I would assume as a grant, as a grantor of the license, and part of their requirement is to say the licensee must also adhere to particular requirements in as far as their, immediate environment, which is the development aspect there. Now, for me, the issue is how is that done? If the board itself does not have a mechanism through which, from a finance point of view, that contribution is coordinated by the board and implemented by the board, or as it is said in terms of the current model, that the licensees are left to their own whims to actually do what is required for them. Now, I'm interested to know, how is the board in its own oversighting or coordination of this particular function? How practically is this done, both in terms of managing such a contribution financially, but also programmatic-wise? If it's not a matter that they can explain it here, it was not part of the presentation, I would request, Chair, that we request that they do a write-up of that and they just explain it to us. How are communities benefiting directly from these licensees, and how is the board itself monitoring that such happens, and actually the results are verified by the board, who is actually the grantor of the license? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nkondlo. I see, Honorable Chair, you want to respond?
Yes, thank you, Honorable Chair, and thank you, Honorable Nkondlo, for those remarks. I'm going to ask our licensing HOD to respond to the first part of Honorable Nkondlo's questions, the standard fee for different activities, and just a brief outline of the different activities that is required during the process of investigation to issue a license. With regards to the issue of a spreadsheet, our CFO can just respond to costing and all of that. And I will respond, and I'll also ask our Manager Legal Services, Ms. Kepu, to add with regards to the corporate social investment. So starting from the bottom, Honourable Member, with regards to corporate social investment, we have different categories of licenses. You have your casinos, then you will have your low payout machines, the LPM sector, then you will have the horse racing and betting sector, your bookmakers and all of that. Now, each of the licenses in the different sectors have different levels to achieve in terms of their BBBEE status. And based also on the license conditions, there are certain amounts which they need to contribute to processes in terms of corporate social investment. Your casinos will set aside an amount, a percentage of the profits after tax, and for labor, they will need to set aside a certain amount of the payroll. So all of these have different conditions, and it's stipulated in the license what those conditions are and the amounts that they have to contribute. The casinos have a different amount as to the route operators for LPMs, and so the bookmakers will also have a difference. Annually, the licensees will set aside those amounts as required in terms of their license conditions. Most of the licensees, they have their own committees that would handle the funds that have been set aside, and they will have processes how they will allocate the funds to beneficiaries. During the quarterly meetings of the various subcommittees, for instance, the Casino Committee, or the LPM Committee, or the Horse Racing and Betting Committee, licenses falling within those sectors will report to the committee on their activities that have taken place. During each quarter, the board committee will also request that the licensee identify a site for the committee to go and visit. So when the committee meets, for instance, at Golden Valley Casino in Worcester, Golden Valley will take the committee to 2 sites that they have identified, and the members of the committee will engage with the beneficiaries of the casino's CSI project. So that is the oversight that it's done. And when we go to the other casinos again, let's say Mykonos Casino, Mykonos will do similarly. Grand West and Caledon, those casinos will do similarly. Also, the LPM committee with the route operators, they will identify projects, and the members of the committee will engage with the beneficiaries of those committees to ensure that what has been reported is indeed taking place. I'll just ask our manager legal services also just to enhance a little bit on the bookmakers, which are very small, and how processes are now being put in place to draw every licensee into the BBBEE arena. Ms. Kepo.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, Honourable Chairperson and members of the committee. In terms of the bookmaker and the totalizator, some of the bookmakers are also have also developed their own software, and they fall under the ICT sector code, which has different BBBEE targets from the generic scorecard. Just in terms of their turnover, most bookmakers would fall under exempt enterprises in terms of the thresholds couched in the BBBEE codes. However, the Horse Racing Committee of the board commenced a dialogue with the bookmakers to look at whether or not there are measures that they can implement from a CSI perspective to target particular vulnerable entities or communities, or albeit their existing employees benefiting through specialized skills development and career progression as a commitment to still contribute in the BEE space. And that process is still currently ongoing. But as the committee members would know, an entity is exempt from complying with the BEE codes if their turnover is below 10 million, and similarly, a qualifying small enterprise complies with a modified scorecard in terms of the codes. The bookmakers that do not fall under the exemption, and even those complying with the QSE scorecard, still needs to comply with BEE in terms of the license conditions imposed. The conditions also imposes an obligation on all operators that are required to comply with a particular level as imposed in their license conditions to submit their evaluation certificate annually as part of their application, as part of their renewal application to the board, so that the board can see their level of compliance and whether or not the level imposed has been achieved. In the bookmaking sector, the prescribed level imposed by the board is that they must achieve a level 5 in terms of the generic scorecard, or if the ICT code applies, then in terms of that sector code. Where license holders do not, in terms of the evaluation certificate, meet the stipulated level imposed, they must include also as part of their application a plan setting out where the shortfall occurred and what measures they will implement in order to achieve the compliance level imposed. Yes, Chair, and if there are questions, we will then take those. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I think that has been explained, but I see there are still hands. Mr. Primo, is your hands up?
Sorry, Chairperson.
Okay, just before you, Chairperson. I see there are, Honorable Nkondlo, is your hand up? Mr. Primo, is your hand up?
Yes, sir. My hand was up for the response to the previous item, but I could just give a slight response on the first question if that is needed, or I think Mr. Lekay first wants to.
Let me just hear, Chairperson, you wanted to say something?
No. I was going to ask, in fact, Ms. Basson, but the Chair, the CEO can respond to the first part of Honourable Nkondlo's questions, the standard fees for the different activities to be performed. Thank you, CEO. You may proceed.
Thank you, sir. There are standard fees for each activity which the board has to perform. So whether we go and do your ITC check or your police clearance, those are all standard fees. We have hourly rates as charged at for our members when they do, our employees when they do a research. But what really happens is that depending on the research, there might be further information required. Like if we see an excessive amount of deposits into your bank account. If it was a normal bank account, it would take you probably an hour. But if they're excessive deposit into your bank account, we need to investigate what those deposits were for, or whether they are huge amounts of money flowing in and out of your bank account. So this takes up more time. So as we go into the investigation, it picks up further investigations required, and that is why there are different costs for the persons. It simply depends on what your information indicates. And so what happens as well is that once we've done, it's like the 1.5, the 500,000 rand that is over will be paid back to the license holder unless the license holder asks us to keep it in trust for any future activity that might happen. So there are definitely standard fees, but the investigation might take longer depending on what information you give us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I see Mrs. Siwa.
Chair, thank you. Just in terms of the members' question, so we perform monthly reconciliation of the trust accounts. So if the committee would want to have some type of information in terms of the spreadsheet that you require, we will be able to assist the committee. Thank you.
Okay. Then it looks like there are no further questions. I think then in the absence of further questions, that actually brings us to the end of the presentation of the gambling board. And let me make use of the opportunity to thank the board, thank the chairperson as CEO as well as the board for availing themselves to come and make this presentation to us. It was very helpful, and then we value the information that we have actually received.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you, Honourable Members. If at any time information is required, additional information, we are at the disposal of the committee. I thank also all members of the EXCO and my fellow board member for availing themselves for this briefing of PAC. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The board can be released now.
Thank you.
Can be excused.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Honorable members, maybe you want us to take just 5 minutes to run quickly and make a quick cup of coffee. And then the time is now 12 minutes past. We back at 17 minutes past. Can we be back at 17 minutes past, honorable members?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, sure. Just 5 minutes.
Yes, Chair.
Now, honorable members, we have, I will prefer that we first, if there are any resolution we would like to take regarding the presentations that we've got, we deal with that, and thereafter we can deal with the minutes and matters arising.
Chair, there's no any resolutions of the resolutions. I'm joking, Chair. I think member only had some.
If we look at the Saldana IDZ, honorable members, some of the issues I just picked up there, I know that there was the issue of the quantification of the CETA funding. There was also the issue on the investment matrix as well as the economic model. Maybe if other members got other issues they'd like to raise, I see Honorable Bartman.
Chair, thank you so much. I do think the economic model and CETA information has already been sent to Parliament, so perhaps just also ask Dustin to check with Zaida, but if not, obviously then I support getting the extra information. But I wanted to find out if we could ask for the offshore renewable energy information possibilities that they spoke about, please. And the second one is not a resolution, but just the request and a suggestion for all of us as members that when we do have entities or departments before the committee, perhaps we must just, when we look at how we draft our resolutions, make sure that if we want to ask how someone is buying apples, that we specifically ask them how are they buying apples, because sometimes the way we draft resolutions and then the presentations we receive don't necessarily then speak to one another, and that's not necessarily the department or the entity's fault, but simply for us a thing that we need to improve upon about how we draft our resolutions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Honorable Advocate. Honorable Nkondlo.
No, thank you, Chair. Appreciating what Member Bartman is saying. I'm sure, I think the entities at this point are not challenged. You know, that if there are issues that we need clarity from, I think it becomes important for us to really continue, even if we go back 2-3 times, because then it helps us in clarifying ourselves, you know, on the matters, especially considering that, you know, how we get all of us into this process. It doesn't mean there is a particular school that you get to be trained in on how you understand a particular sector. So I think we just need to also be patient with each other in terms of how and assist each other, which is what I think Member Bartman at times, even with me in committees, she would do. But I'm just saying, I think it's important for us because we need to be clarified on the work that we are doing. I think that's the point, and I appreciate if there's information in another committee that can be available and it suits the purpose, we can take that up and we'll still ask if that is not the case. Chair, I think on this one, can I just add that there's a question on the OPEX cost centers, which the CEO said they can provide, but she did mention that at this point it lists to TNPA. So for me, if we can just get that breakdown of the cost centers of the current OPEX budget of the IDZ, which will also include, because they did mention when I ask about the local development and SMME CoLab, they say partly it's funded through that OPEX budget. But I think the question still remained around what is there a funding in terms of the different programs, which I think that question on cost centers will help us to see if indeed there is a specified budget for the developmental function that is run by the IDZ. And the last one, Chair, which I sort of didn't have a time to ask there, is on the current revenue. There's a slide there, they indicate the revenue that is realized through the space that they will then grant. I just wanted maybe if they can provide a information if to date they've managed to sort of realize any revenue, you know, since their establishment. Has that, if none, I think because they are still in the process, I think, of opening up spaces, but I understand that they do have some few tenants that are already there. So what is the total figure of the revenue that they have actually realized to date? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Honorable Nkondlo. If there are no other on this one, honorable members, can we go to, on the issue, go to the gambling board? I know one of the issues that was requested, that was mentioned, was the issue of the spreadsheet on the use of the trust account. And I think also the other thing I just really picked up here, maybe having to do with how this resolution, as the honorable man said, are actually being drafted, but it ended up actually raising other issues of corporate social responsibilities by these licensees. And we will have thought that maybe the board have some kind of, it was clear that the board doesn't have a corporate social responsibility, but the licensees have got that, are supposed to have those trust. It might be helpful if maybe at our next meeting, or we can have an engagement with the gambling board as to a report on the progress of these social responsibilities trust. I know is one of the requirements that they also have in their that they have for their licensees, that they must have those. Maybe if we can have some report on the corporate social responsibilities of these licensees. It was one issue, but I see if there are other members who would like to comment on these. On any resolutions, honorable members, on the gambling board. Honorable Maseko.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking that with the information that you were saying, that maybe we can interact about the social responsibility. Maybe if, because the board itself doesn't have that, is the different game. What is that game? Licenses. Yeah, the licenses. Thank you. The licenses that have their social responsibility. If maybe we can ask for the report from them rather than engage with them, because I'm looking at the time and say that
Yes.
we don't have enough time to populate our program.
Okay.
Otherwise, what you are saying, you'll get information maybe next year. And by next year, we'll be populating with the annual reports. So for now, I think it will work with getting the written information.
The report. Okay, thank you very much. Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to, I think, Member Maseko, I think the process that was being explained by the chairperson, of how they monitor or they oversight this license condition, of the licenses is if they can just put it on paper, because I think the other, I think, license HOD of licensing also added the triple BE and all of that. If they can put that on paper, I think it will help also for us to have a sight of how, how this work, where is their role, where is the role of the actual license holder. And then secondly, Chair, for me, I think if it is possible, if they can also attach just what are the license conditions, it makes it easier. Maybe if one has got a copy of a license for gambling board, and I think that depicts exactly how are these things captured, in such a legal document. So I'll be interested to look at it. And lastly, Chair, they did, I think the license HOD also mentioned that there are cases that there is non-compliance of a license holder, and then they would ask them for a plan to sort of augment that shortfall in compliance. If they can just provide a case of that particular nature, where they will provide us, a copy thereof and an explanation of such a particular situation, and the plan. What is the nature of this plan, so that at least those examples can actually be attached for one to read for themselves and have a better understanding of how this thing works when somebody is a non-compliant, but but in terms of the approval process, will be granted the license, on condition that they submit the plan and how the plan looks like. And if indeed they can indicate to us how many of those they do have in the current license, percentage-wise, out of the number of license holders, how many of those, had to then augment through an additional plan, their sort of social responsibility requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nkondlo. We seem to have exhausted that issue, the issues of resolution. Mr. Davids, did you manage to grasp all of that?
Yes, Chairperson, I do have it. I'm just going to re-listen to this whole meeting, Chairperson, just to make sure that I get everything. But I did manage to capture the gist of what the member said in terms of resolutions.
Thank you very much, Procedural Officer. If then, honorable members, if we can then move to minutes. I think it will be the minutes of the 14th of August, Mr. Davids.
Yes, Chairperson. Ms. Kluter will flag the minutes of the 14th of August, Chair.
You can go up with it to see his attendance of people who were present. Okay, you can go up. Then it was the briefing by the department and the Department of the Premier. And then the minutes again. Then there were matters arising. Now on item 5.
Yeah, Chair, so on item 5, Chairperson, that was basically just where you inform the committee that the Standing Committee on Health met on one of the resolutions of the Public Accounts Committee in terms of a matter that we referred to the committee, Chairperson. That was that meeting on Wednesday, the 9th of August, Chair.
Isn't that the meeting that we joined as well, eh?
Yes, it's that meeting, Chairperson, under number 5. Then Chairperson, for number 6, Chairperson, it is just the resolutions that the committee took, Chair, at the end of the meeting for the 14th. So 6.1 is a report on how Casidra was assisted in addressing the cyber attack that it experienced, and assurances on how any future related cyber attacks will be dealt with. Member Bartman raised the under 6.2. She wants to know what's the policy position of the Western Cape government in terms of 5G technology and how it deals with fake electronic messaging in the Western Cape. And then as well, I think that was Member Maseko that spoke to the Department of the Premier that they present on the rollout of the broadband in the Western Cape, including the value for money that's derived from a chairperson. And then basically on 6.4, the committee requested that they be furnished with a cybersecurity report. And that was highlighted by one of the presenters while they presented to the committee, Mr. Augie de Vries.
Okay.
That's about it, Chair.
That we adopt.
On those matters arising is there's a proposal.
Chair, I supported the minutes.
Proposals, and the second, Honorable Maseko, seconded by Honorable Bartman. And then the next item, Mr. David.
There's a raised hand of Member Nkondlo, Chairperson. I don't know if it's a new hand or the old hand.
Oh, that's down. The next item, Mr. David.
Yes, Chairperson and members of the committee. On the 8th of, I just want to flag this, Chair. On the 8th of May, the committee, I just want to highlight this. There we go. On the 8th of May, Chairperson, the committee made some resolution. Okay, these are adopted minutes for Friday the 8th of May that we had. I'm just going to go to our resolutions, Chairperson. Okay, so Chairperson, on 6.3 and 6.4. 6.3 basically is where you engage the committee chairperson, and the committee agreed that the Western Cape or that the Western Cape government, provincial treasury, local government, etc., that they supply the committee with the expenditure allocation in terms of the solidarity fund, this COVID-19, etc. And then again, Chairperson, for 6.4, on behalf of the NGO, all of the NGOs in the various municipalities, just to get a report on how they are being assisted, etc., and the relief to them in terms of the COVID-19, during the COVID-19 period, Chairperson. Now, Chairperson, letters have gone out to these various stakeholders, and we did get reports, Chairperson, which I've emailed. I think it was in July or in early August. I've sent to all of the committee members. But Chairperson, on this, Chairperson, at that meeting of the 8th of May, you've also indicated that you would like the stakeholders to present on these reports. Now, I have spoken to the chairperson of the COVID-19 ad hoc committee, Chairperson, and the chairperson of that committee is of the viewpoint that it falls within their ambit to have briefings on such natures with regards to COVID-19 and solidarity fund expenditure, etc., Chairperson. So, Chairperson, that part of the resolutions for 6.3 and 6.4, where in terms of not only having the reports, but being briefed on the report, Chairperson, that is the contentious issue, Chairperson. These reports have been sent to the SCOPA members, but now the question is, Chairperson, from an administrative point of view, are we just going to leave it there where we say, okay, it's fine to just have the reports, it's fine, we're not going to have briefings? Or does the members of SCOPA still insist of saying, look, we have the reports, we also want the briefings? Or are we just going to let the COVID-19 ad hoc committee sit with those briefings, Chairperson?
You see, the way I understand it, if you look at on the program of the committee meetings, our next meeting, I think it's somewhere on the 14th of October, where we will be having a presentation from, I think it's local government, as well as the Department of Social Development, and I think of Health as well, regarding the issue. I think it's a resolution we took long time ago.
Yes, it was on this 8th of May, Chairperson.
Yes. So far as I'm concerned, that still stands, but let's get the view of other members. I see Honorable Bartman, Advocate.
Thank you, Chair. If I remember correctly, I think 6.3 and 6.2 was your and Honorable America's resolutions. Because we've already received the reports, we've at least then received the written information on it. But I would like to suggest that you just ask the ad hoc chairperson whether they would consider doing a briefing on the matter and then inviting SCOPA to their meeting. But I don't see a problem with being able to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Nkondo. And thereafter, Honorable Maseko.
No, Chair, thank you very much. I would actually, yield to that proposal of Member Bartman, because I'm not sure, Chair, because you see, when things emanate from this particular committee, perhaps it would be a question of clarity, either in the rules or in whatever prescribed law that prohibits this particular committee or any other, to engage on matters of COVID-19. Because since this matter is a cross-cutting issue, because it's related to obviously programs of particular departments that are overseen by the various standing committees of Parliament. So for me, I think that conversation can still be held between yourself and the chairperson, but I would believe that at some point, whether it's done through that committee or it's done through here, it remains a resolution of this particular committee, and such a resolution needs to be realized as we had requested, because there was context to it at the time that we're debating the matter, which I think in terms of the oversight of that committee may not necessarily underscore. But at this point, I am more than okay with that proposal, that you can debate it. But I think as a principal matter, it's something that we must establish, that now that we are still under COVID, if there's any matter that is related to SCOPA or any other committee, which rule or which legislation then prescribes, that such a committee cannot engage on matters that are related to COVID, but have to take it to the ad hoc committee. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Maseko.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think Member Gondra has covered me. I think the most important thing, Chair, is for you and the Chairperson of the ad hoc committee to sit down, and so that maybe you can, from each other's side, understand what is it that you wanted us to deal with from this side of the committee, and our mandate goes to what an extent, and her mandate as an ad hoc committee goes to what an extent, because of I tend to believe if you can sit down together, you will meet each other halfway, and we will help us to get the mandate on this new thing, because this is a new thing, and try to follow your lead, Chair.
No problem, honorable members. I'll certainly then be in contact with the chairperson of the ad hoc committee. And then, as I've indicated to you, in any case, there was a program that has been set out regarding us having to look at these matters. But of course, having engaged with the chairperson of the ad hoc committee, I will most probably then keep the members up to date and report back as to the outcomes of our engagement. And then if that is the case, then I think we've are fine. If there is is there any other issues that members would like to raise?
Member Bachmann.
Advocate.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I just wanted to find out, you sent us a letter from the Speaker regarding an engagement you had regarding the Doringebach matter, and I just wanted to find out when you'll be tabling that letter at the meeting, as I do have some questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that actually, if there's a need, because I remember when we look at the resolution, when we look at the minutes of when we dealt with that, I think it's something that we still need to deal with. If maybe we can deal with it in our next meeting when we meet, we can put that as well as an item on the agenda. I really don't have a problem.
Thank you, Chair. I'll look forward to your tabling of the letter then. Thank you.
Is that the letter from the Speaker, the response of the Speaker?
Yes, Chair, you emailed us a letter from the Speaker
Yes.
regarding the Doringebach matter.
Yes. No problem. I think that can be no problem. I think maybe even it's in our next meeting, we can actually deal with that matter.
Members, Nkondo's hand is still raised, Chair. I don't know if it's the new or the old hand.
It looked like it was an old hand. I see now it's gone. Thank you very much. I think then, members, if there is no other issues or other matters, that actually brings us to the end of our meeting. So
yes, Chair, like your famous words, we have exhausted all the questions, Chair.
No, thank you very much, honorable members. The meeting is adjourned.